Okay, Claire, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Sure. Welcome everybody to the first of the COMET meetings. This is an introductory and kind of discussion session. So today, after initial introductions, we will be going over a little bit about the COMET Taskforce and what we imagine, how we imagine that being arranged, some proposed workflows, and then leading into a discussion about our product vision statement. So just to let you know who I am, I think I've met a few of you before in when I was working on Metadata 2020. Um, I am the community outreach manager for COMET. So you can come to me with any of your questions. I'll be in touch with you about scheduling further meetings, about documentation and drafting those. I'll be your point person in relation to any task management. And I'm also in charge of all the kind of outreach and website and all of those things. So I'll also be keeping everyone up to date as to where we are in the project. So expect to hear from me. I'm on the email address that sent the invite to this meeting, info@cometadata@gmail.com. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Juan.
Hello, it's good to see some familiar faces and so many people interested in joining us here. So I'll say a little bit about who we are before I jump in. And to start off, to say I think we are people that love metadata in some way, which is a fairly select group in society. People that are just actually somewhat passionate about metadata, that think about it, and that just have it as one of their core beliefs that metadata is something that's important. I think we're people that build scholarly infrastructures. In some ways, we're involved in actually, putting some of these pipes together and getting this metadata to flow and getting this metadata to be captured. We're also people that suffer the consequences of bad and incomplete metadata. So I think that it's important to acknowledge that we are actually folks that have in some way, when metadata is bad, we see those consequences. We have to deal with them. We have to work with them, both in what we build and what we do. And I mean, also say I'm Juan. I work at the Public Knowledge Project as a scientific director, and also Adam, John, and Maria from Maria, who's not here with us today, but Adam and John are from California Digital Library. So we are also actual people, as opposed to not just having people that have this relationship or this odd or particular relationship to metadata. And for the purposes of this task force, and I think this is an important part that I want to emphasize in my couple of minutes that I'm going to be speaking to you, is that we're also just conveners. So we're sort of just trying to bring people together in this, people that have gathered, folks that have this kind of relationship to metadata, that recognize that there is some challenges to be dealt with. And we're just trying to play the role of bringing everyone together so that we can have a conversation. We also have ideas which we're going to share as part of the process, and we're going to share them in the same way that we're going to invite you all to share your thoughts about how we might be able to tackle some of these challenges. But fundamentally, we're just trying to bring everyone together and be facilitators of a process. The problem that we're, I think, all trying to face and trying to deal with it, you have it there in front of you. I think that we recognize that the current system for maintenance and enrichment of PID metadata is sort of inefficient and disconnected. And fundamentally, as conveners, we are doing this work of convening because we think that this problem is a shared responsibility. It's not something that any one person or group could tackle on their own. It's something that we need to tackle somehow together. The background story of how this has happened. So I think many of you have been involved in conversations that have experienced these challenges, right? That have thought about different ways in which they might be solved. Conversations over many years amongst different sort of pairs, groups, if people have just kind of been thinking and trying to tackle these challenges, and realizing that, these problems cannot be tackled by any one entity or any one group. At the Force 11 Summer Institute that happened earlier this year, there was an initial group that was gathered to start to talk about these things. You probably saw Adam's blog post that was sort of both a result and an instigator of that meeting. And then some of us met in Paris at the Barcelona Declaration Conference, again, to continue this conversation. And what was realized, and there's another blog post sort of emerging from that you might have seen. And what sort of happened at those meetings and what was sort of confirmed that led to the creation of this task force is that we realized there really is enough interest out there from this disparate group, and the number of you that are joined today is a perfect example of this, that are interested in trying to tackle this problem as a community. And I think that was enough interest to say, like, look, there's this push, there's this interest from the larger group to create a task force to try to see how we can tackle those things together. And if you can just go to the next slide. And so that's the creation of this task force sort of, I think, is justified in seeing all of you that are here today. But we also recognize, I think, that we understand that we need to provide some kind of shared vision for what we need to do, but we can't also solve every metadata problem all at once. And so that's a little bit what we're going to be trying to help do through this task force, we know that there's many different dimensions and manifestations of this metadata problems, but we need to still articulate a concrete, manageable slice that we can figure out sort of where to start beginning to do. The goal of the task force is not necessarily to solve all of these metadata problems, but rather sort of come together and articulate sort of the structured and shared vision for what we broadly all agree that needs to be done. And so that's, I think, just to lay that groundwork, that we're here to convene. We know that there's all of this interest, and we need to sort of try to see what we can agree on that is a good, manageable piece of this challenge to start to work with. With that, so let me do just one more. So I think that's the role of the task force, is to collaboratively define the scope, the aims of a model where the community comes together to enrich PID metadata. We want to, as a task force, articulate the shared problems and ways in which we work towards that solution. And we want to create some documentation and so for a call to action that will help us reach these solutions. So I think that's the role of the task force, is really to be able to sort of put all of this together. No, we're not going to do all of the work and solve all of the problems, but we do need to articulate the problem and sort of document that so that we have a shared way forward. With that, I'll hand it off to John, who's going to continue from here.
Yeah, so thank you. I think Juan laid it out pretty nicely, that what we're here for is really the reason why we're calling ourselves a task force is because we have a task ahead of us. And some of you may have joined us in previous discussions, and some of you may be new to this. So what I wanted to do is just kind of walk through what we're trying to accomplish and make sure that everybody here has a tangible understanding of what this task force is tasked with. We are here in many ways to create a call to action for ourselves and for the community. We are here to build documentation, as Juan was saying, that describes the types of workflows and processes that we collectively agree are needed in the community. So kind of that, going back to that framing statement that Juan started with, that we understand that persistent identifiers are important, that we need them. We understand that the metadata that is attached to persistent identifiers is essential to the work that we do and to the future of communicating research. We also know that there is a gap. And so we want to respectfully and fully diagnose the problem. And then we want to start to draw ideas for implementation and development to solve those problems. And so this task force is going to follow a step-by-step process. We're going to be pretty regimented about the way we work. We're going to try and make it so it's not so boring and laborious for everybody. We want to make it energizing and interesting. We respect all of your opinions. We know that you and your networks know a lot about this subject. So we are not trying to speak down to anybody at all at any point. As Juan said, we feel our role is really convening, not to be considered the authorities. We really want to convene the authorities in this space, and that's all of you. And so the hope here is that through a regimented process of listening sessions, that we'll be able to grab information, pull together information rather quickly, and move towards the task in front of us, which we are saying is this call to action. So a call to action that will result in us publishing out to the community a call for people to join in on implementing and developing our solution. So This is the timeline that we are thinking. So it's a very aggressive timeline, but this is the structure that we're thinking we will go through. Our goal is for this task force to last between now and March 1st-ish of next year. It's a very quick turnaround, especially since the holidays are coming up. But what we want to do now is just make sure everybody here understands the work ahead of us. It's very well laid out, and that there's an opportunity for people to ask questions. And of course, you can ask questions in the chat today. We have time for discussion today, but also reach out to any of us or to Claire at any time to talk about how we will be moving forward. But if you look here at this timeline, you'll see the way that we're going to move through the process. And we will be hearing from Adam in a little bit about the specifics of some of the ideas that we've collected from the community and that we have around how we will actually accomplish these goals together of making metadata more iterative and more community driven. But the thing that we want to make sure everybody understands is how the process will work. And so starting in November, which we're in right now, we are in the process of convening the groups. We have a session now, and we'll have one later in the day today that really introduces everybody to the process and to the scope. And our goal for this month is to make sure that we have a consistent product vision for how we're going to move forward. So what is it that we're trying to actually build? And when we say product, we don't necessarily mean that we're trying to build something that a salesperson will go out and sell. What we're talking about is structurally, what is our vision for this thing? So it's not just an idea, it's an actual tangible thing. So getting on the same page about that, and we'll talk about that later today, is really what's important for us in this first month. In the following 2 months, what we're going to be doing is a series of listening sessions that Claire and the team here are going to help convene. We're going to pull together different topic areas that we know are important to getting us to their final call to action. And we're going to pull together documentation. And so with your help, joining those listening sessions, helping with the documentation writing, we're thinking in February, we will be able to have a draft where we're actually putting out a draft of governance ideas and technology and product ideas that could help fill the gap that we're trying to. And so for us to be able to do this, we know that what's really important is for us to have tangible understanding, all of us, about what it is that we are trying to do. And that really does require us to get into some detail around workflows. And so I'll pass it off to Claire real quick just to talk about what we're asking from each of you before Adam then can help us really get into the nitty gritty of some of the workflows and the ideas that we've all been researching.
Yeah, so we're definitely obviously looking for participation in those listening sessions. We want to hear your perspectives and thoughts and ideas. And then your commenting on or co-creation of those community statements and documentation that John mentioned. We're also going to be asking you questions through surveys and polls. So your active responses to those so that we can use that data to include in documentation where relevant and appropriate. That would be really helpful. We're looking for general advocacy for the project to your networks. We want everybody to know about what's going on and why. We want you to, show your support. And generally your overall input to help shape the project and COMET success. We're not looking to, as John said, kind of hand down an overly defined process. We're looking for your participation in shaping what we're doing. So with that, handing over to Adam.
Yeah, hi everybody. I want to go into a little bit more detail about concretely kind of what we're talking about, where we are right now, the limitations of that model, kind of where we want to go and how to get there. So I'm going to start with that first part, taking a high level view of where we are right now. So as we all know, persistent identifiers and their metadata form the core of our infrastructure. They provide an authoritative source of truth for identifying and tracking research outputs, allowing for seamless and consistent exchange across services. It's a system that has flourished over the past 20-some years, and for the most part, has served us remarkably well. We're not trying to discredit it in any way. But as it has evolved, we're also coming up against some of its limitations. So next slide, please. Specifically, there's a limitation in how DOI metadata is produced and maintained. DOIs operate on what we could call a push model, meaning their metadata is produced by some entity who then registers it with a service like Crossref or DataSite. From that point forward, the creator is the one who's solely responsible for its upkeep. So even if others in the community discover errors in what's been registered or could improve the metadata, only the original depositor can make these changes. If the depositor lacks the ability to make these improvements for whatever reason, or simply doesn't see the value in doing so, that metadata forever kind of remains incomplete or incorrect. Next slide, please. But of course, the world itself doesn't stand still, even if the metadata is kind of frozen in place. Everything built on top of it is in a constant state of growth and development. Research assessments become more sophisticated, funding compliance grows more complex, open access agreements require more detailed tracking of where work is being published. So in order to be effective, the underlying metadata has to be kind of continuously improved to keep up with these changes. Next slide. So what has happened in response to this push model limitation then? The community kind of routes around it by working outside the DOI system. Various services step in to fill the gaps, enriching the DOI metadata, adding back the kind of real world metadata that workflows need to be successful. So even if these enrichments are sometimes inaccurate, more incomplete, sometimes wrong, beats less impartial data with a claim to being authoritative. The kind of size of the market for these services doing that kind of work, enriching the metadata, clearly demonstrates kind of what users prioritize and where they see the value. Next slide. But this kind of silo enrichment is also where things become problematic and kind of fundamentally unstable. So what it does is creates a fragmented landscape where improvements exist in isolation, disconnected from the broader ecosystem. This kind of fragmentation manifests in a few different ways, but specifically, first, it creates large-scale kind of inefficiencies through duplicated effort, where one organization invests time and resources in improving metadata. Those improvements kind of remain trapped within that system. Other organizations then have to repeat that work, multiplying kind of total cost and time spent. Second, it introduces significant operational risk. These enrichments are often siloed within specific commercial services or similar platforms. If an organization loses access to them, whether due to cost increase, a service being simply discontinued, or strategic changes at their organization, they can suddenly also lose years of careful work. Third, it kind of undermines the authority and consistency PID metadata was supposed to provide. Different services make different, potentially conflicting improvements to the same metadata without any kind of path towards resolving or joining them back together. Next slide, please. So that's the problem statement where we are, but what if we could kind of change all of this? What if we could create a system that maintains the authority of DOI registration while embracing the enrichment being done by our community? So that's kind of what we want to talk about, today, why we're all gathered together. So instead of enrichments being bound to specific services, what we're thinking is that we decouple them, allowing them to exist independently and be shared in a format that any service can produce. A validation layer then acts as a trusted broker where we combine kind of various forms of automated rules with expert review to ensure quality while also kind of carefully tracking provenance around improvements. This creates then a clear trusted path for enrichments to flow back to our sources of truth, removing that fundamental limitation of the push model and DOI metadata. Next slide. So when enrichments are then decoupled in this way, the whole community can see, validate, and build upon them. Organizations can switch systems without losing years of efforts. We can leverage different strengths across services while ensuring improvements remain accessible to all, even if services change or disappear. Most importantly, these validated enrichments become part of the permanent authoritative record, creating a system of kind of constant refinement where every improvement strengthens our shared foundation, regardless of where it originated. Okay, that's all very ambitious. And now that I've talked through this, I'm sure folks are immediately thinking of obstacles or reasons why this work might be challenging. But let me just kind of briefly interject and say, we've already done this. We've already been successful in this work. It's called ROAR. It's the organizational data set, feeding myriad different services, being constantly improved and refined by us all, and independent of any one kind of specific use case. The scale of the work that we're talking about here is obviously quite different, and I don't want to underestimate the challenges that kind of come along with that. But the problems themselves are not really intractable. More kind of important, I think, is that we navigate them using the same product principles that have proven effective in this context. So next slide, please. So what are those? First, we make something useful exist as quickly as we can. We're not kind of aiming for perfection out of the gate. We're aiming for utility. What that means is we focus on meeting immediate needs and high impact use cases where enrichments can quickly kind of add value and address known gaps. Second, we use known real-world implementations to identify and make additional high-impact improvements. So we grow better through actual use, with each integration kind of revealing specific and urgent needs. These concrete use cases then allow us to prioritize what really matters versus trying to anticipate everything in advance. Third, and maybe most importantly, we focus on iterative refinement rather than pursuing comprehensive or top-down designs. So this is where many projects in our space can go awry. They try to architect perfect solutions that account for every possible thing before solving any core problems. The result, they either never launch or launch something that's so complicated it's difficult to adopt. Those that succeed have very big ambitions, but they kind of start small, learn from real world usage, and then evolve based on user needs rather than theoretical completeness. So I'm sure that sounds very simple, but these principles are kind of powerful precisely because they are simple. They're kind of like keep us focused on creating value, overcoming the obstacles we need to, rather than kind of getting lost in the pursuit of some, ever elusive perfection. Okay, that's all from me. I'm going to turn things over to John, Claire to talk about vision.
Yeah, so I think before we jump into the vision statement, we want to just make sure that everybody here understands where we're headed. So, so far we've talked about the big picture issues, what we as a task force are tasked with doing, thinking through how we're working within the community, convening all of you and others to tackle this together. We've talked a little bit about the timeline of the work that we want to achieve. So it's very ambitious. And there will be a lot of different items that we're going to be relying on each of you to help us with. As Claire mentioned, we are going to have listening sessions, but in between those, there will be drafts of documents that we'll want to we'll want your input on, and we'll be doing that input through direct kind of comments on documents, as well as surveys and polls and discussions, asynchronous discussions. So that work that we have ahead of us is real work. So we're excited that you signed up for it. And it is something that is the goal, the end of this that we want to see is something where we have tangible documents, similar, as Adam mentioned, thinking about the ROAR example, where the community came together to form ROAR. It was by all of us getting together and really forming what do we want from this type of work from a governance perspective and a product perspective. And then the community presented out to a call to action that people responded to. And the work that we are doing now as ROAR, the work that is happening on behalf of all of us, it is because that process launched it into inception. So we want this type of a process to be similar in the sense that we here are drafting governance, product vision statements, documentation around what we want as a community, so that at the end of this task force's duration, we will have documents and a call to action that will allow people in the community who are resourced to, or collections or cohort of community groups that can come together and answer this call, so that there is a clear articulation to the community what we actually want. And so the first thing that we wanted to do to get towards these outputs is to talk about a product vision statement. And so right now, we're just going to jump in and we're going to start working and talking about the first work package item that we have for the group. I'm getting a little bit of comments in the chat, which I think is really great. And I think if you have comments or you want to start a discussion right here in this meeting, please do. We have the chat open and we can start to discuss some of the issues that come up. So the first couple of questions are about scope around DOIs and advocacy for this project, and what we mean by PIDs. So before we jump into the vision statement, I can maybe just kind of quickly discuss some of these items. Other people that are here can jump in as well. We have been mentioning this as a project that is around quote unquote PID metadata. So Carol's question about DOI metadata. Yes, we want to think about this, while we want to think about this as a community need across many different types of identifier types and many different metadata types. We are really trying to focus at the very beginning on specific values, as Adam was mentioning. And so to ground the conversation, we are trying to ground at least the initial discussions in DOI metadata. The reason for this is not because we don't think that these types of needs are not there for other types of identifiers, but just to think about how we can create tangible next steps for the community that is valuable to all of us, and to make sure that we can move quickly. We have talked about how these ideas are applicable to other identifiers, not just DOIs and ORCIDs and RORs, but also things like ISBNs and other kind of identifiers that are not in the core SCAL-COMS community. Also, we understand that there is a proud tradition of metadata work that happens at libraries around cataloging and other initiatives. While we understand that is something that we definitely need to leverage as part of this, we are really focusing on DOIs in the sense of how a persistent identifier relates to the metadata file underneath of it. And so there's a little bit of scoping that is important for all of us to understand, especially at the beginning, not because we want to discredit or exclude, but more that we just want to be focused and focus on something tangible. Another question that's come up in chat is around advocacy to the larger RDM community. It is definitely something that we want to think about as we're moving forward, how we can do advocacy into all communities. As Claire was mentioning, we are really relying on each of you to think about where the value of this type of effort could be and where it is applicable to your networks. And we're really looking for each of you to become advocates and help us talk more about this need. Again, in that positive tone that Adam was bringing up, one where we respect that the DOI ecosystem is something that is very valuable and we in no way are trying to disrespect it. But as one of its values is that we are part of that community, and part of the community that makes it powerful is that we can work together to make it even better. And so thinking about how to work from an advocacy perspective is something that we'll really need a lot of your help with. Another question is around where the task force members are coming from. There's a few places that we have been working to build this task force membership. The first would be existing Crossref DataCite, SCAL-COMS PIDs community members. So those that are invested in and fully understand the workflows that Adam was bringing up. It's really important for us to ensure that we're working in tangible ways within workflows that already exist so that we can iterate off of them and make them better. And so working within those communities to find interested, passionate people, as Juan was mentioning, around metadata is something that we started with and that we've been working from. And of course, we want to work beyond just those communities, but that's where we started. Second is that there have been adjacent communities that we've worked through. As Juan mentioned, we had a meeting at Force 11 and using the Force 11's global community to discuss these topics, as well as the Barcelona Declaration community, and those that have been interested in evolving the ways that citation indices and other forms of research information are disseminated. And so really trying to think about how we can even expand that even further and make sure that we get the right voices. I will say, and maybe others have opinions, we do need help with further expanding this group. So if you have people that you know would be willing to do the tangible work and understand the tangible work that's in front of us over the next few months, please reach out to Claire, reach out to any of us, and it'd be great to get them involved. This is a fully open task force that is really around bringing as many voices together as possible. And we have a question about PID metadata. So I think what we're trying to say, the reason why we're calling it PID metadata is really to try to make sure that we distinguish the type of metadata work that we're talking from other quote unquote metadata types of work. We know and we respect that there's a lot of work that's happened in other spaces around metadata. As I mentioned before, there's a very long and very important work being done in cataloging and metadata in libraries. This is something that we understand and we're very well aware of. And we just want to make sure that there's some way for us to discuss the unique challenges that face us within the persistent identifier community. And while we want to rely on the expertise and the information that will come out of other types of metadata work that are happening, we want to just make sure that we have a way of just distinguishing that from the work ahead of us as a task force. And so we're just using that phrase PID metadata as a way of kind of talking about DOIs and ORCIDs and RORs and others that are kind of adjacent to that, and talking about the round tripping challenges that Adam brought up in the workflow diagrams that are unique to the persistent identifier communities. Okay. And I see a comment about just making sure that we have good case studies and highlighting how incorrect metadata has affected our communities. It will really help us understand and show the scope and the risks of the pluses and minuses of fixing the metadata in the ecosystem. And that is absolutely part of what we're trying to do. We do want the outputs of this working group this task force to really be about having more and more uh, information about diagnosing the problem, but we also want to make sure that this task force is tangibly focused on building and creating a shared vision and documents for that call to action. So maybe what we'll do now is, just after going through some of those questions in the chat, we'll now jump into what we've mentioned is the first homework assignment and the first item that we have in front of us as members of the task force. And so what that is creating collectively together a product vision statement. So if you have more questions, please put them in the chat. We can have other people answer them. It's not just me rambling up here, but also all of you have input and ideas, not only how to ask questions, but also answer them. So please ask more questions in the chat. And also, if you see questions that you know the answer to or have an opinion on, please also reply within the chat, and we can open the discussion up later for more dialogue. But let's jump into, with that, this work that we have ahead of us around a vision statement. So if we go to the next slide, we can kind of, as a group, talk a little bit more about what we mean by product vision. So what the team here that's convening this discussion is thinking about when we think of a product vision, and the reason why we think it is a good first step for this discussion, is because we want to really focus on clarifying the both aspiration side of what we're trying to do, but also the distinguishing factors of why we want to do it and with the approach that we're trying to take. And we know that we'll have to iterate over time on this. We're not going to get it perfect the first time. But what we want to do is really start to think about this at the beginning, so that as we move forward with things around governance and things around product features and workflow ideas, that we have something to rely on as a guiding star, as a vision statement for us to point to and look to. For those that are not familiar, there's a format that many groups use for this type of work. The format is listed here on the screen, but it's kind of this idea that, for if you have a thing that you're trying to build and you want to describe its vision, you want to make sure that you define it within a product category of things, and you want to make sure that you articulate the benefits and the value of this product that you're creating, and you want to distinguish it and create and articulate the main differentiators. And so the format usually is like, for our thing, who so and so needs, our thing is part of this category of things, and it's unique for these reasons. Unlike other things, our thing has these major differentiators. And if you can fill in those blanks in that format, then you kind of have started to build a good product vision for your project. And so what we want to do here is to start the discussion about what we would want in a product vision statement for the work ahead of us for COMET. So just real quick, any questions about the process? Everybody understand that this is the type of thing that we're moving towards? Okay. If you have any questions about the process or the type of product vision statement that we're putting together, go ahead and put it in the chat. But we'll go ahead and go to the next screen. Slide. So here's the sample product vision statement that we have put together. This is what we're wanting some feedback on. And I'll give people a second to scan it, and then I'll read through it. Okay, so what we're trying to do again with this product vision statement is to articulate what is the type of thing we are, what really define what we are trying to do. So not just our project, but the category of projects that we fit into. We're also trying to articulate key differentiators, why this is different from the past, or why this is the right approach or the future that we're wanting to move towards. Okay. So with this product vision statement draft, we've said this task force is trying to build a collaborative framework for metadata enrichment. And so what we mean by that is we're not trying to be prescriptive on what the actual enrichments will be. We're not trying to be prescriptive of what the updates to a specific metadata element or a metadata file will be, but more that we're trying to pull together approaches for changing the workflows as Adam's diagram showed. And so this framework is designed specifically to improve the quality, accessibility, and interoperability of metadata. So again, the category that the thing that we're trying to build, it is not just around the idea of making metadata better. It's also about ensuring that the accessibility and interoperability of metadata is thought of. So for example, we don't just want to turn a text string into a better text string. We also want to think about how these metadata files can be machine readable and machine actionable, how the controlled vocabularies that are used can be held against data dictionaries and interoperable with other systems. It's just an example of kind of the robustness that we're looking towards. So we want to improve this metadata across diverse platforms. So make sure that it's not just focused on one specific vendor, one specific space. Unlike existing approaches, which often focus on isolated improvements within specific ecosystems. So often many of us are taking a metadata file and we're cleaning up on our own. COMET will create a unified community-driven model that encourages contributions from a wide range of stakeholders. So what we want to do is make sure that there's a workflow for bringing in enrichments and a community-driven model that unifies these and encourages that a wide range of stakeholders can be involved in this workflow. And this can include institutions, infrastructure, as well as curators. There are a lot of different groups that fall into this. We think of publishers and getting people through the Crossref community, or institutions and people through the DataCite community. These are all people who are part of that institutions and infrastructure and curators that are really helping with metadata files. So we respect that persistent identifiers are a foundational source of truth. And so I think that's one of the things we hope all of us take away, and that, as part of this task force that you take and hold true, which is that persistent identifiers are part of the ecosystem, and they're part of it in a way that should be considered foundational to many other information systems. And we want to tend to them as sources of truth. And we are committed to working closely with these trusted sources to manage their metadata responsibly. So we're, again, not trying to create a new silo. We're trying to find ways to bring quality information back into the sources of truth. So we're not trying to create yet another silo. We want to find ways and workflows for that to happen. So ensuring that COMET upholds integrity and reliability in data enrichment efforts. So that really comes back to the trustworthiness. The idea that we want to have trust indicators for people to have auditability. There should be transparent workflows. As Adam was mentioning, we have done this before as a community, and there are ways for us to do this together for for a broader set of metadata files and features. And so we want to make sure that we have that kind of trust indication very early in our vision statement so that it remains consistent throughout. Okay, so kind of going back to what the goal is of this task force and how we're going to be sequencing our work. This vision statement is our first homework assignment. I think it's great that we're getting feedback directly into the chat. We will be recording. We are recording this session, and we will grab the transcript of the chat. We will add some of these inputs into the document. But over the course of the next couple of weeks, we will also be sending out information to all of you to get your help with iterating on this and making this as strong as possible, bringing together as many of the suggestions to make this really beef this up so that not only is it something that helps us articulate it to external people, but also for us to have as a foundational piece of information as we move forward with other action items. Okay, so anything from the chat that Adam, Juan, Claire, that you're seeing that we should jump into? Just going through.
There's some questions around what who the community is, and when we're talking about community, so like asking for a little bit of more detail on how are people, who's going to be involved and included here. And I would say this is it's a very open question. We are not, this task force itself, open around who's going to help participate and formulate this vision. The people that participate and want to take part in helping to shape this will be welcome. I think that we have a broad conceptualization of community here. I think that there's so many different users of PID metadata, and we know that those use cases, as I was also articulated in some other questions before, there's a bunch of different use cases about where that data goes and what the needs are. And I think we're trying to lead a process and convene as broadly as possible so that we can have all of those use cases and all of those people that want to participate in helping to make this vision a reality be present in the conversation. And similarly, that means that there's a responsibility of everybody here, that if there are groups that haven't joined on because they are not so immediately within our networks, but that should be part of the community and you think are an important actor that needs to be part of the conversation, then I think that task force, also and the people that are here need to try to help us do some of that outreach and help them to be involved or help to bring in their perspectives in some way. So,
and I'll mention that we have a website that it will be going live shortly, and on that website will be listed everybody who signed up to participate, so you'll be able to see if there are people that missing that you think are really important to join, but that information will be available soon.
Yeah, I also think it's a good question because it should clarify what we are doing and aiming towards versus who we are now. So I can see that if you were to jump into this right now, never hearing any of the previous framing, you may think that COMET is a task force, and then you wonder, why is the task force itself a framework? So maybe one of the things we do need to clean up is that what we're doing with this statement is talking about the product vision for the future. So yeah, I think there is a little bit of clarity that needs to happen there. So this product vision is not specifically set around the idea of what is it that the task force for the next 4 months is going to do. It's actually so that's maybe something we need to clean up. It is the product vision for the call to action for what we as a task force are trying to ask the community to do longer term. So yeah, just kind of clarifying that. So there's two sides of community in my mind. There's the community-driven task force, so getting as many people as possible, the diverse opinions into this work that we're doing. As Juan said, if you have anybody that you'd like to join, bring in, please. We'd love more people that are interested in taking action. The longer term conversation about what is a community-driven model for curation and for enrichments, that is one that I think we do want to tackle as part of our governance work. So We will, as part of the listening sessions we mentioned, we will be doing a series of discussions around how does this future thing get governed? Well, who is it important, to be involved? How do we manage the resourcing of it, but also how do we manage the governance of decision making and moving forward? And so when we talk about a community-driven model, we have the work ahead of us of defining at some level what that model is and how the community will drive it. So I think that's part, if you have questions about what that will be, we also want some answers from you about what you think it should be as we move forward over the next 4 months.
See a question there around, is it PID only? And this relates to some of the earlier questions about scope, around which are we working with DOIs or ORCIDs. And I'll say that, we try to lay this out at the beginning, that we're trying to pick what is that sort of actionable, something that's immediate, that is actually, that we can actually try to articulate a concrete vision towards. If we start expanding in this initial conversations around what the product vision statement is, to be something that can address every kind of metadata that's out there, I think we're going to end up at a point where we don't have anything concrete that we can try to action. I think that as we are thinking through the concreteness of being sort of focused on DOIs and on, and thinking about PIDs as being a way of articulating and talking about this, it doesn't preclude us from also having in the back of our mind what are some ways that a model like this could work in a much broader scale. But I think as a task force and as an initial step, we do need to try to make sure that we keep things scoped enough that we can do something that's actionable, because we don't want this to just become a visioning statement for something that we have no way of ever trying to materialize. The goal here is to set it up so that we can have a call to action to actually be able to do something and say, this is a concrete thing that can be done that will make things a little bit better. We'll do an iteration of improving on this subset of metadata. But by all means, keep in the back of your mind as you're going through all of this, what are some ways that the same idea, the same kind of a model could apply to broader things? But as a task force and as an initial step, we are trying to make sure that we keep everyone sort of on task on keeping this scoped and focused to what is a concretely actionable output.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe next slide. So we'll be taking this draft. We'll be sending it out to each of you. We will be looking at the information that's in the chat, working through kind of track changes, kind of workflows to work together on getting as many inputs as possible on how do we build a really strong product vision statement, making sure all of us here in the task force are on the same page about what we want to present to the community at the end, this call to action that we want to bring to the community. So we will be doing this work offline. As we mentioned before, we have a lot of work ahead of us as a task force, very short timeline. But again, one of the reasons why we're setting ourselves these aggressive timelines is because we also know this is work that needs to start soon. We need to get to the call to action soon. And we also know that this type of work is in many of our heads already. We understand the complexity, but we also understand that the solutions can start to be iterated on relatively quickly if we can get something on paper. So we want to bring people together quickly, have conversations, listening sessions, draft ideas quickly so that we can get to that call to action, as Juan was mentioning, relatively quickly and start moving on actually doing work. And so this first initial step of the product vision statement will be done offline and asynchronously as we move forward. And we can maybe talk a little bit now about kind of other next steps that are going to happen and how everybody will be organized, and the COMET Taskforce will move collectively.
Yeah, so in addition to the feedback, as John mentioned on the product vision statement, look out for invitations from us for those listening sessions that we mentioned. Also look out for those questions in polls or surveys to respond to. as I said, we'll be publishing the website that includes a list of all the participants. If you do not wish to be listed on the website, please do let me know now so I can remove you. Otherwise, because you're here, you're automatically included. But please take a look, see if there's anybody that you think really should be part of the task force, and reach out to them, reach out to us. You'll also be provided with materials along the line, including obviously the website URL, but any additional materials to help spread the word about what we're trying to do. So in terms of the next steps, the most immediate steps, this is the kinds of things you should expect, but there'll be, other action items and activities kind of further along the line. Okay.
And so when we talk about the listening sessions, I just one real quick, going back to what those specifically are. So the two big buckets of meetings that we'll have will focus on governance. So as someone asked, what does community driven mean? We will be talking through what does that mean to us? If there was a system for submitting, curating, determining, and publishing out and building round trips for quality enrichments of metadata, who do you think should be at the table of governing that, and what kind of groups need representation, and what is important for us, and do we think it's something that requires its own organization or not, and these types of questions. So we're gonna have a listening sessions around that. So we really want to get your opinion on how we build something that is community driven and what does that mean. Another set of listening sessions will be around the product. And so those will really be rooted in many of the kind of conversation questions that Adam was bringing up. We have a workflow that exists within our space where people submit metadata, create a persistent identifier. How do we build one where there's other opportunities for groups to bring in and update that source of truth? And so we'll have a series of listening sessions around what are ideas and what are important considerations for us to think about when we're building those new workflows collectively. And so those listening sessions will then feed into documents that we'll ask for asynchronous support on, and will bring us to the conclusion where we send out the call to action as a task force for people to join the effort and start working together on building this. Okay. Anything?
I saw at least one person smiling, John. So that's all. I'm just gonna say that.
Yeah, I agree.
Looking at the faces, at least one person was smiling of the folks that have their cameras on. So
yeah, and I think there was a comment that someone was talking about urgency. Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things we want to do is there is a sense of urgency around this, in the sense that it has been something that has been in the back of mind or has been explored in the past. Why are we trying to move so quickly? In many ways, we should just clarify, we're not suggesting that there will be an implementation in 4 months. That's not what we're recommending. That's the urgency is, and we know that this is a longer term community effort. So that is not the intent. So if people felt like that's what we were saying, we apologize. We do not expect that in March there will be something that will actually be built and deployed. Instead, what we're talking about is building a set of documents that are call to action of the community, that this type of thing should be built by these people in this way, in these groups. So who out there is interested? And so what we are here doing is building a call to action for the wider community to come together. So the urgency is really about us pulling together statements and scope and putting some meat on the bones around what it is that we need. And that's the thing, that's the urgency. So hopefully that clarifies what our task force is tasked with. And just bringing it back to, we want to make sure that we do this together with as many voices as possible. But once we're done at that, with this immediate work, there will be more work to do. we're not suggesting that this is the whole picture. Okay. Any other comments or items for right now? So Claire, you will be in contact with those, is that right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. I look forward to the next months working with each of you. And we really appreciate the time. I know that there's a lot of work going on in many different task groups and working groups. We appreciate you joining us for this one. We know it'll be fun digging into some of the complexities here together. And hopefully we'll see you again on some listening sessions over the next few months.
Sounds great.
Yep.
In the meantime, you
Thank
can
you.
always reach out. Yeah, thanks everyone. Appreciate
Bye.
everyone's time.